Everyday life issues broken down to help you build your own opinions on the issues that matter most. Coming to you from Austin, Texas, this is The Deciding Factor with your host, Alton Hill and John Herzog.
Hey guys, I am John.
And I'm Alton.
And we are bringing you The Deciding Factor. Today, I think this topic's really going to be good for all of us. It's going to be about public speaking. And here's the big kicker, is presentation or content really what matters the most? And to help us walk through this is a guy named Brenden. He is the founder of MasterTalk, a YouTube channel that he started to help the world master the art of public speaking and communication. He coaches purpose-driven entrepreneurs on how to master their message and share their ideas with the world. Welcome.
Thanks for having me, guys. Great to be here.
No problem. Hey,
Yes.
I don't know if he's watched them, but I have watched several of your YouTube videos, and man, you're not only good, but you're handsome at that. So that's always good.
I'll take it.
But, this is going to be a nice little topic. I mean, presentation versus content. And, that really is something you think about, even sitting in business, sitting in church, doing public speaking like what you do and coaching. So what do you think, Al?
Attempting to do a podcast.
Yeah, attempting. Oh, man. We're having hiccups already before the show started. So
how long have you had your YouTube channel, Brenden?
Yes, I started MasterTalk probably 18 months ago, but I've been coaching people for probably 4 or 5 years, Alton.
Nice. So what's like a common theme that you see when you take on these clients? Is it pretty repetitive, or does everybody have their their own little quirks, or what do you notice?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's pretty similar when you have your own podcast, and you start, you're kind of like, how do I ask questions to a stranger I've never met before? But after a couple of runs at the bat, you're like, oh yeah, I know Brenden, this is easy, right? So you kind of go through that process. So for me, it was the same thing. Mm-hmm. But I think the biggest theme that I've seen is this fear of public speaking that we all seem to have, but don't really understand. So whether you speak to anyone in New Zealand or Australia or Canada or the States or really anywhere, we're all scared of public speaking, but we don't really understand where it comes from. So I shine a bit of light on that.
Nice. Yeah.
So what's the light?
Yeah, I usually wait for people to ask because I don't want to go on a 5-minute monologue. It's not because I'm trying to hide anything. Don't worry. So the way that we want to answer this question, think about it, is to ask ourselves a very simple question, which is, where do we give most of our presentations? And the answer is school. Whether you're a high school dropout or a PhD, everyone learns how to speak in the education system. Because think about it, we don't wake up one morning and say, hey, John, Alton, you want to get breakfast and present all day? Like, that just doesn't happen at all. We're in school, 3 things happen. 1, we never get to pick the topic. 2, students don't care. Not because they don't like us, because they're worried about their own presentation. And teachers are too stressed to coach us. But all of these behaviors gets perpetuated in everything that we do, whether it's history, arts, music, sciences, languages, math, over and over again. We're taught to believe that public speaking is a chore. No wonder we all suck and hate it.
Speak for yourself, man. No, actually, I had to do the Lord's Supper at church this past weekend. I had it perfectly written down. I had it memorized. It was very simple. And before I got up there, I got nervous as all get out, and there's hardly anybody watching. I don't even, we had cameras and whatnot for YouTube, but I don't even think about that. It's the people in the crowd. Even if there's 5, I'm like, oh. So how do you get past that?
Yeah, absolutely. So once we go back to that fundamental kind of fear issue, right? Because every time we've spoken our lives, it's always been tied to a result. If we were at school, it's tied to a grade. If we're at work, it's tied to a result. And if we make a mistake at any part of that process, we get punished, whether it's a lower grade in school or that promotion that just slips past us. And because of that fear, the first step to mastering public speaking is understanding that the fear isn't our fault, but rather the fault of the system in which we grew up with. So once we start from that foundation, the way that you want to master communication to remove that fear is what I call the repeatable presentation. Because if you do the same thing 100 times, 50 times, 25 times, and it's a topic that you're really passionate about that solves a problem for people at the church, whether it's teaching, new immigrants English, or whether it's, teaching parts of the Bible, or, whatever the religious belief is, you're very passionate about that topic. And if you present it over and over again, and keep solving that problem for different audiences, you'll be a lot more obsessed with getting it perfect the next time around.
Wow.
I like it. So tell us, where did you do your first presentation then? Was it at a school?
He just told you.
He said everybody. He didn't say he did it.
No, it's a good follow-up. So the idea, Alton, is my origin story was when I was 5 years old. My parents sent me to a French school. And the reason is because I was born and raised in a city called Montreal in Canada. Mm-hmm. And in Montreal, French is a required language. You need to know the language to do business in the city and to speak to half the population. Yeah. Luckily, most people know English, but, it's good to know French just for the business people.
Yeah.
So I studied in French, but except one issue, I didn't know how to speak it. So for the first 15 years of my life, not only was I uncomfortable with presentations, I had to give them in a language I didn't even know. So I would walk up there, grade 2, 4, 6, 8, and just go, yeah, this is not going to be fun. Yeah. So that's kind of where everything started for me. But the way that it picked up was when I went to university. I did these things called case competitions. So basically what that is, think of it like professional sports, but for nerds, right? Yeah, I know it's weird. While other guys my age were like, playing football or rugby or, I don't know, like soccer or watching soccer. As you can tell, none of those things apply to me, right? I would still eat the same chicken wings as everyone else, but I was watching other people present, and I was doing that competitively, and that's how I learned how to speak.
Wow. And you coach now, which, I mean, you look extremely young, so people give you crap for that all the time, don't they?
Yeah, just the people who don't want to be sold. I think that's it. That's a good one. So just to give you guys idea here. So I started coaching people when I was 19, and I started doing these competitions when I was 20-ish. And then I got a job in corporate America. I guess corporate Canada in this case, when I was 22. And I started coaching C-level executives when I was 23.
Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, you still look like you're 23 to an extent.
Oh,
so
I am. I'm 24. It's close enough.
Oh, okay. Good. There you go. So I watched, of course, one of the videos you actually sent me in the very beginning, and you actually helped with the actual presentation side of things, where it was get rid of the and I thought it was very insightful. So teach us some tricks there.
Of course, I'm happy to speak on that. So the idea with ums and ahs is a lot more simpler than people think. The reason we say filler words is because we always forget what we want to say next at some part of a presentation. And when that moment happens, whether it's the first second we open our mouth or 5 minutes later to the presentation, we start to go, what am I supposed to say next? So we look at the slide, we start to panic, and we use filler words to buy time. Oh, I'm scared. What does my audience think of me? John and Alton are just looking at me, and I'm freaking out. And then I just start going, blah, blah. But what great speakers do, or rather exceptional ones, is that same space, they say absolutely nothing. So they still think about it. They still don't know what they're going to say next. They're still nervous, but they replace the very space where most people say filler words with nothing. And that is the difference.
So I was in a speaker's class for, I guess, a little over a year. And one of the teachers in the class is actually a politician. And, speaking into what you're saying and pointing out the difficulty of sitting in that silence, he did a little awkward experiment where he said in the beginning of his presentation, he was going to go an entire minute without saying anything. He was just going to stand there and wait for an entire minute. And that's, baked into his presentation. And I think he said, even though he planned it and he had been doing that, after like 40 seconds, he just couldn't take it anymore and went into his speech. But I always thought that was funny and must have been terribly awkward for him to just sit there. But in the class that I was in, they were talking about the impact that silence can have when used properly. So
right. And I love that you mentioned that, because I love to push on that. I actually take that to the extreme. I don't think a minute's enough. I actually do 5 minutes with the people I work with. Yeah.
What?
Because
5 minutes.
The reason is because, just by the way, kind of as a side note that has nothing to do with public speaking, it also helps you with your life. You know, a lot of the executives I coach, I always tell them, I go, when was the last time you looked at your wife for 2 minutes? And they just went, no, I can't handle the stare. I was like, we're going to try that today. And then they come back to me and they're like, well, you know, it was a great opportunity. But I think the idea is, when we learn to pause for indefinite periods of time, it sucks at the beginning. I totally acknowledge that. But over time, when you're crazy nut like me, and you can do this for like minutes on end, sometimes I even do 10 minutes. You know, it's just crazy. When you go back to your 3 to 5 second pauses in your speeches, very easy.
Yeah. Yeah. You're kind of like training yourself. You know, that was something that I read in a book one time about the art of persuasion, and it talked about eye contact. And this is something that I'm aware of and still work with, honestly, in that when you're in a conversation, whatever it is, if it's with your wife or with just another human and you're really wanting to connect, you have to have your eyes connected, and you can't be looking away or looking down, and just internally it doesn't work well. It breaks that connection. And, you know, I'm just thinking about locking eyes with my wife for 2 minutes is kind of nuts, even though we've been married for almost 18 years, but I'm going to take some notes and give that a shot.
Yeah. Okay. So presentation versus content, you know, for me, it seems like if it's the content, it's something you're obviously going to really remember. So, you know, thinking into the content side of things, wouldn't it be great to have something very big and powerful to really say versus focusing on, or these long pauses that you were talking about?
Right. But since you two are also going to answer the question, why don't you give your take and then I'll give you mine? Because it's usually hard for people to go after me. I guess.
I got to investigate it first. I you know, because right off the bat, you know, I would think content, but the problem is there's a lot of things you teach in presentation. So I don't know. I guess. Okay, let's do it this way. What about teaching people to come up with content? How do you go about doing things like that?
Yeah, absolutely. It's actually really simple, and I always try to keep things simple with the way that I explain things. Content, what does that mean at the end of the day? It's coming up with a key idea that people want to remember. If we achieve that goal, because they won't remember everything, we don't have enough time to explain all of our ideas. But if they retain those key ideas, those 2-3 main points, we win the presentation. So what I always start with the people I work with or the people I speak to is the simple question to figure out your content, which is as follows. If it was your last presentation ever for the rest of time, and after you present, it's over, you never get to present again. And in that presentation, you can present for as long as you want. You can take 2 hours, you can take 30 minutes, doesn't really matter, except a couple of things. Your audience won't remember a thing. They will remember you, your name, your title, or even your content. But they will remember one sentence. What do you want the sentence to be? And that is what we call, or to add more layer, the ultimate key idea. And from that ultimate key idea, because that's the one sentence you're ever going to say in your life, and that's the only sentence that's going to matter, the next step of your framework in figuring out the content is what's the best way to defend that key idea. So if you take me, as you can probably guess my key idea is, I can talk about a lot of things with public speaking. I can go over silences, ums and ahs, audience mastery, eye contact. We could spend a decade just going through all of those YouTube videos in a show. But if I'm here to convince anyone of one sentence, that one sentence is as follows. Anyone can master public speaking. I fundamentally believe that public speaking fear is a myth. It's not real. right? Because if someone like me could present in a language he didn't even know and go on to speak to senior level executives and do all this stuff, what's stopping you from doing that? And that, if I convince you of that idea and you forget everything else in my presentation, the presentation is considered to be successful because you'll follow up with me. You'll check out the videos. You'll go check out other podcasts. You'll listen more. You'll go join a Toastmasters club. You'll take action. But if I don't convince you of that idea, then I lose and we lose.
So do you do that at the very beginning, the end, or both?
So the key idea is more of a framework of thinking about how to build your presentation. So let's say in my case, from that key idea, how I usually present, so let's say I do my first 60 seconds, my keynote starts something like this. When I was 5 years old, I struggled with communication, blah, 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 blah. And then after, at the end, I say something like, at the end of the introduction, that the story has a simple message to it. And that story that I'm here to convince you today is that anyone can master public speaking, because public speaking and leadership is taught in the exact same way. We know leaders aren't born, but rather created, and I'm here to convince you the same thing with public speaking. And then I go into my intro, blah, 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 and then I get into the content.
I love it. I love it. So what was it that turned you on to really wanting to do this and to be so motivated to have that mission?
That's a great question. I think the idea is it depends on the person, and we all get happiness from different people. I know if people have seen Free Solo, the documentary. If not, I highly recommend it. It's basically this dude who climbs one of the largest walls in the world without rope. So it's called Free Solo. Highly recommend it. And what he said in that documentary that I really enjoyed was when Alex said that happiness for him is about doing great things. And that's not true for everybody. Right? For other people, they'll say, happiness is about having a great family, which is also great. There's nothing wrong with that. But I think the number one derivative for his happiness was doing amazing things, like things that no one else can do. So for me, the question was really simple. All I wanted to do when I was 12 was, get out of poverty, get a great job. And I did that fairly quickly. I work as a technology consultant at IBM, so I do well for myself. But then after that, I said, is that all I'm going to do with my life? Is there something else I should be doing? And for most people, the answer is no. It's just like, oh, I made it. Like, this is awesome. I'm going to make crazy amounts of money and all this stuff. But MasterTalk sort of fell on my lap because, I'd coached all these people. I realized I was the youngest speaking coach in the world without even realizing it, frankly. And I had this opportunity of democratizing all of the information on communication that no one else has done in the past. The only other person I can think of who has done this is Dale Carnegie. But the issue with Dale is he was born in the wrong time period of history, so we don't know what he sounds like. We barely even know what he looks like, and we don't know how his programs are really structured. I'm sure he has his courses, but we don't really know if they're made by him, rather branded by his name. And I have this opportunity because I just happen to be born at the wrong time period, in the right time period, that when I die, people can still use my content and learn how to speak.
Wow. Yeah. So that's just thinking about seeing Dale Carnegie on a YouTube channel is pretty epic in my head right now. But so let me dig up some dirt here and tell us some times where maybe you bombed it or maybe some memorable moments in some of your presentations.
Oh yeah, like we can spend a whole episode on this one, but I think the idea is you're always going to bomb in presentation. Even today I bomb a lot. It just happens. But I think the idea is, like, if you think about me, my first 15 years was just bombing presentation.
Yeah.
If you walk into a presentation, you don't know the language, you're off to a bad start, right?
For sure.
You kind of just say like French, bonjour, and then it's like, what do I do after? So that's definitely a couple. And obviously, there's a more specific example. Last year, gave a presentation to a group of teenage girls. And let's just say, yeah, to you guys, I'm the young guy, I'm the young kid on the block, but to them, I'm the old geezer who's there in a suit, a corporate guy who's teaching them how to speak properly on a Sunday morning at 8 a.m. Oh yeah, it's I'm a riot. The kids just go crazy for me. Yeah, absolutely not.
You chose the wrong day and time.
Yeah, that was really challenging. But I think what made the difference the year after I went, because the first year wasn't really good, was I thought much harder about how do I change my tune. Because back then when I started speaking, which wasn't too long ago, it was 2 years ago-ish, year or two ago, when it was my first iterations of my keynote, I used to gloat a lot about my accomplishment. The reason I did that wasn't because I was a show-off. It was because I was really insecure. because I was like 22 presenting to very senior executives who are mentors for these little kids. And I was just there, I better show them what I can do. But over time, what I realized, especially when I started talking to those girls, we had lunch together, you know, in those events and stuff, was they didn't care what a CEO was. They don't know what IBM is. They don't know what all these clients are. But they like having fun. They like a great story, and they like simplicity. Mm-hmm. So I went back the next year, brought roses, and was a riot. Everyone loved me. I just started comparing public speaking to roses, because what little girl doesn't like roses? And now I get invited back every year. But that's the thing. You kind of just you got to play it carefully. But I still bomb to this day. So, yeah, no worries.
So but you're learning, though, right? I mean, that's what it sounds like to me.
Absolutely.
You're still learning, like all of us are.
Yeah, definitely. Maybe we can do that pause we were talking about.
For like 5 minutes.
What's good about a podcast
I can't take it.
What's good about a podcast is I can just go back and cut it back out, and we'll never know. So
that's true.
It's always good about being live.
Do either of y'all watch Rhett and Link? Ever heard of Rhett and Link?
No, but the fact that you watch something is surprising. So
Rhett and Link, I don't know how many subscribers they have on their YouTube, but they've got, I think, 20 some odd seasons, years of, I don't even know how to describe it. It's just pure entertainment. Just two guys sitting there being goofy. And they do these different taste tests. And I love their little awkward weirdness. And it's called Good Mythical Morning. If you've never seen it and want to know how weird I am, you can check it out. But there's a lot of other weirdos out there too, so I don't feel so alone. Anyway, they're doing a food test on what is the most chewy food in the world. And they had some Japanese or Chinese food, and it's not gum. It's just the most chewy food. And so they do the little intro, and then they both start chewing, and they literally chewed for 9 minutes straight. And I'm like, what in the world? It was so awkward and so long. And I was just fast forwarding it. But anyway, the awkward silence made me think of that. So I guess if you have 20 seasons of YouTube, you can just sit there and chew on camera for 10 minutes straight.
And how long?
No, go ahead.
How long have you been doing these YouTube videos?
Yeah, for sure. And I was about to say, it sounds like there's a much more productive use of my time now. I got to start watching these seasons of people chewing gum and stuff.
They have this one segment that I really like, and I know I'm getting off topic, but they have this segment called the Will It, and they'll say, "Will it taco?" And then they'll put the weirdest stuff in the taco, but it escalates. So in the beginning, it might be, gummy bears, but then by the end, it's like scorpions or something crazy. So anyhow, now that I've lost everyone here, I've heard a story, and I'm trying to remember who said it. I think it was Jim Rohn. Have y'all heard this story where he talks about the steak? No. All right. No. I've lost everybody on everything. This is perfect. I'm right in my comfort zone. So the way he explains it was talking about your delivery to people. And he says, let's say that you have this really great steak. It's aged meat. It's been perfect marble. And then your chef, he just makes it perfect. And you put on your nice clothes, and you're sitting at the table, you're waiting, and he's got this steak, and he puts it on the plate, and the plate's warm, and he's bringing it out to you. And then right before he's ready to set down the plate, he just smashes you in the face with it. And the point of that is you can have the perfect content. It's very desirable. Everyone wants it. But if you don't deliver it well, then what's the point? Brenden, I'm surprised you haven't heard this story. It's a very, very famous story.
I would still eat the steak, though. I would just pick it up. So I guess that's why I haven't heard of it, because it's an $80 steak. I'm not going to waste that.
I feel like we've lost control of this show already.
But yeah, it makes sense. I would probably use a better analogy, for no offense to Jim, but
well, so how do you work in there with the content and delivery? Do you have someone speak and then you critique them, or how does that go? You know, do you have like a weighted system?
Yeah, normally I actually don't talk about this. I have a video on the show, but I'll mention this because you mentioned steak. So a lot of people ask me about storytelling versus fundamentals, and then we'll get into content versus delivery. So should I focus more on fundamentals, you know, like ums and ahs, or should I focus on telling a story? And the way that I explain this is through garlic bread. I call it the garlic bread analogy. So let's run through this.
I like garlic bread. This is good. I like
I figured you would. That's why I'll mention it. So anyways, so let's picture the following analogy, right? So it's 7 a.m. You got your PJs on, right? And you get out. I don't know. Maybe this is a thing in Montreal. So you get out of your house and you go to the grocery store to get some fresh bread, right? So you go to your local grocery store. You buy bread at 7 a.m. You know, it's for breakfast. So the question I have is, would you just eat the bread plain? And the answer for most of us is yes. I mean, it's bread. It's fresh. It's hot. Yeah, you don't need jam or anything, but like it's, you know, it'd be nice. But at the end of the day, it's still pretty good, right? But if you're at a barbecue, right, let's fast forward to the summer now, and, you know, we put a little bit of garlic butter on the bread. Now we're talking, right? Garlic bread's amazing. It's a lot better than just bread, though we could live with bread. So in the analogy, bread is fundamentals and garlic butter is storytelling. So if you got a nice piece of bread and you don't have garlic butter on it, it's just bread, it's still pretty good. The analogy is, if you have pretty good fundamental skills as a speaker, but your storytelling isn't that great, you're still going to come off pretty well if your fundamental skills are really good. But the opposite is not true. Would you just eat garlic butter?
No.
That's gross. I would never do that. The same way, if you have really good storytelling but you don't have any fundamentals to back it up, it's not going to go so well. It's going to be disgusting, actually. Hi, one day this happened, and this is how it went. Yeah, it was raining, and see, it's just broken. Right, the story's broken. But if you have that amazing piece of bread, you put a little garlic butter on it, the combination of storytelling fundamentals is what really takes your presentation off to the next level. But focus on fundamentals first.
So do you have ways to fix people if they've got, say, a boring conversation, but you're able to spice up their presentation? Are you able to really work with that, or what?
Absolutely. The way that I think about boring topics is there's no such thing as boring topics, just boring speakers. That's a good way of yeah, like seriously, that's kind of how I explain it to people. I'll give you an example. So I majored in, you probably wouldn't guess it, I majored in accounting in university. So you can imagine, oh really? You're familiar. You can imagine it's not the easiest thing in the world to get people excited about the tax code. Because the thing is heavier than I am, okay? Especially me. So the people that I worked with in group presentations, we would still present it really well as if it was the most interesting thing in the world. Why? For many reasons. One, we looked interested. If I'm presenting tax code like this, obviously everyone else is going to go, well, this is boring, because the speaker thinks it's boring.
Yeah.
Number two, vocal tone modulation. So if you present with the same vocal tones throughout when you're explaining boring accounting policies, well, and the teacher's sleeping too. But if you're explaining accounting policies and you're explaining why each of those policies matter to people and why you should be listening to them, it's a lot less boring. The third thing is attaching it to the why. How do you simplify boring topics in a way that anyone can understand it? So if you think about accounting topics, if you just present the policy to Joe the baker, Joe doesn't care. But if you look at Joe and you say, what are you trying to achieve with this bakery, Joe? And Joe goes, oh, well, Brenden, I want to share these sweets, these pies, these cakes with everyone in my local community. Then I would ask Joe, well, then for you to be successful, how much do you need to manage your numbers? How important are they to your bottom line? So you need to understand these accounting policies so you can have 10 bakeries. Does that make sense to you, Joe? Joe goes, yeah. And that's the key. There's no such thing as boring topics, just boring speakers.
Wow.
All right. So I have a question regarding, like you mentioned your keynote and kind of polishing that up. If we asked you to come deliver some presentation, and let's say that you had to create some new content for it, what is realistic for you to prepare and, would you just make a couple notes and show up? Or do you think that you would spend, 80 hours rehearsing that? What if, and if you can answer it to like, okay, Alton, you have to go give this new presentation for XYZ. How much time should I be investing into that so that I can deliver it well in your mind?
Yeah, great. Yeah, the way that I see this, Alton, is for most speakers out there, especially those who are interested in going pro and like getting paid to speak, there's no such thing as new. I don't want to ever hear people doing new presentations. It'll always be the same one. So if you think about me, as of this recording, I've probably presented 900 times now. I'm nearing up on 1,000. Yes. But the thing I want to point out, though, is 400 of those times, so 40% of all the presentations I've given in my life have been the same one. Okay, have been the same exact one. So if I get hired to speak, it's the same keynote. And I'm not the only one who does this. Actually, all the best speakers in the world do this. And I'll give you Tony Robbins as an example here. So imagine we went to one of his seminars and he looked at it and said, John, Alton, you know what? I've been talking about mindset and motivation for 30 plus years. How about we talk about porcupines this weekend? What do you think? You're going to look at them and say, Tony, no, you're not supposed to do this. I didn't pay $1,000 for you to talk about freaking porcupines. Talk about what you know. Gary Vaynerchuk, 13 years, $125,000 per speech. Hey, guys, from Soviet Union, came to America. You guys got any questions for me? I'm pretty open.
What?
People love it.
Yep.
Wow.
Do the same thing.
Yeah, see, I've been teasing him. Like I say, I want to get involved in some of these keynote speakings, and I just, where do you start? Do you try to figure out all the content? How do you go about figuring out what topic to do, or what? Where do you start?
So I'm happy to make this a coaching session. I think for you too, the topic is actually super simple. It's how to grow a podcast, how to monetize a podcast, and talk about your own podcast. So you can have a keynote, and for both of you, it could be the exact same keynote, if I'm being honest, since you're both co-hosts. And then you just present it into your local communities. So John goes to one community in Texas, and then Alton goes to another community, and you guys double team. And then after a couple of months, everyone knows your show. And then all of the influencer communities will want to have you because you're the #1 podcast in Texas. That's how I would play it.
Yeah, I like that. But question here, what about if we did the speeches together? No?
It's possible. Possible.
That was a deep breath.
Very I didn't want to, because I don't want to misspeak. I'm not saying it's not possible. You can do it. It's just really hard. Like, I've competed against speakers in competitions where like they come as duos. They almost never make it to finals because it's really hard to coordinate. Like, but what I mean by coordination is just so we're all on the same page here, because this doesn't apply to most people, just really you two in this situation, is when you're speaking at like a top 10% level or a top 5% level, it's easy to coordinate to a certain extent. I silence here, you silence here, Ellen, you need to kind of be in that sync. But to get into the top 1% of speaking, where most people get paid, the top 1-2%, it's a lot harder because now you're squeezing in like every little molecule of seconds. I've seen that being done really well in dance. I think it's much harder to do in public speaking. That's a personal opinion. It's possible. I'm not saying it's impossible, but it's definitely tricky.
That's the perfect example, though, is dancing, right? And having to have that partner and all that, or like figure skating with a partner too, probably, right? You gotta really nail it. So I guess, you do a lot of keynote type of speaking, but what about the C-level exec? Like for me, I might have the opportunity to present at a chamber of commerce or at a network meeting for my business, right? Just to promote my product services. Do you think it still makes sense to just have that same quote? Yeah. I mean, it's not really a keynote, but that same kind of ironed out
elevator speech.
Yeah. I mean, it's
Absolutely.
more than an elevator speech, right? You might get 5 or 10 minutes to deliver it with slides and whatever, but you think it should just be the same thing and really.
Of course. The only difference though that I would add to that as a caveat is you want the same standard 45-minute presentation broken down into different versions, but it's all the same keynote. So I've presented my keynote in 3 minutes as high as 2 hours. right?
Oh,
So it's just
wow.
a 3-minute version is just my key idea. My name is Brenden. I'm the founder of MasterTalk, blah, 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 elevator pitch, key idea, and I'm done. But if I have 10 minutes and I share 2 tips, like I'm giving a workshop literally after this, right? Same thing. I have 20 minutes in that one. So I'm going to talk about 3 tips. If I have 2 hours, I make it more of an interactive workshop. But I think for you, you definitely want to always be, this is the goal, right? Because I always push people to go for the top. In any setting that you're in, you have to always make sure you're the best speaker by far. So let's say at a chamber of commerce where you don't have that much competition, it's like, 4 speakers, we're all friends.
Yeah.
You still want to make sure, so it's also really easy to be the best speaker in the room because then 80% of the people, remember 80-20 world, will come to you. If I got 10 minutes before I got to go to my next meeting and I have to talk to one of these speakers, I got to make sure I talk to Alton because that guy was amazing. I got to see who's coaching this guy. Like, what's he doing? What's he up to? Right. That's the key.
Yeah, no, that's great. I mean, that kind of brings me to another question though, as far as when you're wanting to sell your services and does anyone ask you like, hey, what's the return on my investment? Oh, you're just a kid. Like, how do you answer that question?
Yeah, for sure. Definitely one I get a lot. I would say the idea is, so a couple of things, and this applies for anybody, right? So let's run this through, right? If you're in your 20s, you're too young. If you're in your 30s, you should focus on your family and your mortgage. If you're in your 40s, you should focus on getting your kids to college. If you're in your 50s, you're getting a bit old now. Why are you starting a podcast? If you're in your 60s, you're retired. Why are you doing anything? You should just be hanging out on the beach. It doesn't really matter how old you are. You're always going to get complaints and resistance. Just the name of the game. So the secret is to focus on the people who need your help and are willing to listen to you. So another way of looking at this is the number one rule of sales is don't sell someone who doesn't want to be sold. And the other rule is only invite people that you know for sure are open to your advice. And the best way of doing that is to show, not tell. So what does that mean? When I pitch CEO clients that I want to work for, and there's not many people I pitch to these days, that's something I used to do when I was starting. I wouldn't message them and say, hey, I'm Brenden. Here's a video. I do this. No, guys. I would email them with the 73 mistakes that they made in a keynote that they gave on YouTube, and I go figure it out because you suck. And then 10 minutes later, usually they email me back and go, how much do you charge again? Right? Because the speech coaches they worked with clearly weren't very good. So I think the idea is it's all about how much you actually know. So the way that I think about this is simple because, I'm also happy. I'm also lucky my business partner kind of helps me, opens those doors for me. But I think the idea is simple. If you're good at what you do, the best thing about business is that the market's pretty fair. If you can deliver the result you say you can deliver, right, at the end of the day, and people trust your result and people get the result, you're going to get referrals, whether it's other people your age or whether it's senior executives. Like I think the oldest person I've coached is late 50s. So people do listen. You just got to pick the right people who are open-minded. And usually those people either are podcast hosts. So if you think about this, right, this very conversation we're having, why did we say yes to this? We said yes because it's a double-edged sword. You understand the value of communication because you're podcast hosts. And there's not many speech coaches who go on shows to begin with. So you look at it and you go, well, his videos are pretty good. Let's bring him on. Let's be open-minded. So if you focus on those small communities, Seth Godin calls it the smallest viable audience, then you can grow and expand your reach.
Oh, man, we're going to have to spend money after this show. I need help.
So
Don't worry, not the goal.
I mean,
he's going to send me an
good,
email and tell me how bad I am, and he's going to point out every little spot.
Well, I love what he said because I'm in a BNI group. I love the group, and each one of us gets 60 seconds every week to give a little like elevator pitch, and I've thought about exactly what you said, Brenden, of 1 week just writing down like little tick marks next to each person's name for how many times they said and just to help us all, right? Just to say, I don't know if you knew, but in 60 seconds, you said 60 times. If you didn't know, like, let's try to get it to maybe 58. Something, I don't know, right? I'm not the speech coach, but it's great. So important. And I guess I want to re-ask my last question in a different way, in that how valuable are your services? Because it sounds like people of all ages are willing to pay, and you wouldn't have grown your YouTube channel and be on, would you say, approaching 1,000 different opportunities to speak. So how do you really value what you're doing and empowering people to do?
Yeah, I think the idea is it really depends what your end game is with the business. So for me, I'm very different than most entrepreneurs because I never really wanted to be one. My goal is really simple. I want to be a senior level executive at companies like McKinsey or PwC or IBM. And a lot of those people have a pretty simple way. They just work 90 hours a week every week. And then in 10 years, they wake up, they have $500,000 a year salaries. Like, that's just how it works.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why I initially did competitions, because most of my friends end up becoming bankers on Wall Street or working in consulting and things like that. But, right, a couple of months before I started working, there were so many students who kept asking me for how did you learn how to speak? How did you learn how to speak? I was just like, well, I don't know. I'm just self-taught. Just figured it out. I don't know. But since I had 4 months to kill, I kind of just said, why not just see what's out there? And I spent a full day watching all of the, we're talking PhDs from Stanford. We're talking, really smart people in communication. And they didn't know anything about communication. It was terrible. It was so bad. I was vomiting in my mouth all day. And at the time, I think I was 21 or something. And I just said, this was so bad. Like, I was so frustrated, to be honest. This is so bad. I could do better in my mother's basement with a phone, with no budget, no lighting. That's what I did. I started making videos. Never wanted to make this a business. I had I still have that job, very good lined up. But then the content started getting better. People started watching a bit more. A lot more people were saying, hey, you should do something with this. And then CEOs started emailing me to coach them. And I just said, really? You want to pay me to do this thing? So I think for me,
love it.
Yeah, part of it was luck for sure. I'll be honest. Part of it was skill. I just knew a lot about the topic. I like how you're like, no.
No, I'm denying that statement. Can we redact that from the record? You said it was luck. It was not luck. Go ahead.
Fair enough. I think the idea, right, is so for everyone's end game is different. Like, some people want to be 7-figure business owners. Other people and everyone's got their thing. For me, the number one priority is getting people communication tools that they cannot afford. Because the one thing I hate about this entire industry is that people, a lot of the best speech coaches in the world who either belt at my level or higher at this point in the game, or usually a lot older than I am on average, they charge a lot of money. We're talking $1,000 an hour, minimum for those types of people.
Wow.
If you want one-on-one with them, it's $1,000, $2,000. I don't charge that yet, but I'm sure I'll get to those rates eventually in my life.
Who needs to be I need to be a speech coach now.
No, not yet, but I'm close enough. But I think the idea that I'm pushing is they don't have any free content. They're not incentivized. If I got 12 CEO clients, I don't need to make free content, guys. And that's the situation I'm in. We're not in a position anymore to do that because the CEOs just introduce you to other CEOs. They're like, he's pretty good, she's pretty good, and then you're done. And that's what really irritates me about the industry, because I was like, what about the other 99% of people who can't afford this stuff? And that's why I got so passionate about creating the videos. So I put a lot of my personal capital into YouTube. So my goal is to be the biggest media company on public speaking. That's why I don't really have right hooks in my videos, but everyone's got their own thing. So I'm a lot more focused on the YouTube channel than actual getting more coaching clients.
So I guess my question is going to be more for the everyday Joe. When it comes to business speaking, church speaking, whatever it may be, when it comes to the content side of it, do you teach people that it's better to have presentations? Should they have a little cheat sheet in front of them with bullet points? What do you tell them?
Sure. So let's talk about the cue cards right away and knock that out. I hate cue cards. You should never use them. The only situation where you want to is if you're an absolute beginner speaker, which is usually the case if you're 13 years old, you're getting started, you're really scared of public speaking, you just being on stage is a win. So that's 1% of people. The other 99% of people, let me give you the number one reason why cue cards are never going to make you better as a speaker. It's because it creates a barrier between you and the audience. So as I'm having this conversation with me and then I pull up my phone, I go, hey, let me just take a look at this. I'm creating a barrier between me, the speaker, and you, the audience. And cue cards do the same thing. So it's I'm telling a story and I'm getting really excited, and then I just look at the cue card and I go, and I'm really and then I look at It doesn't help anyone because most people who use cue cards don't actually need them, if not everybody.
Mm-hmm.
That's one part. Second part is slides. I coach with slides, and the reason I do that is more of a mental thing rather than a speaking thing. Let me explain. So let's say I'm coaching the both of you and we're working on your slide deck. It's a lot easier for us to be on the same page if we both have something to look at. So say I give you feedback on your speech, and you understand intellectually what I'm saying, but since you can't really see it exactly on a slide or in a video, even if I show you in the video, it's not as clear because even if you see it in the video, you don't see yourself improving exponentially. But if you look at your crappy slides at the beginning in workshop 1 and in workshop 3 your slides look incredible, mostly because I make them, right? You start going, wow, I'm like this amazing speaker. And that's the mental shift I'm trying to get people to do. So I highly, highly recommend, especially since we're only focused on one talk. Hence, I'm sure you're both realizing the importance of doing one talk now, because if you do 10, you have to keep starting all over again. But if you're doing 10 times, you're making those slides a little better. Oh, slide 2, this kid is ugly. Let me just bring the more prettier kid, which is the thought process for me in my slide. And then when you're at version 350, now you're like, I don't need slides anymore. You give the same talk without slides, but you start with slides.
Wow.
Yeah, and oh, sorry, John, go ahead.
No, it's all you.
Well, I was just thinking, so in my business, I do web design, marketing, branding and stuff. And I find talking in space is hard. And so many people are visual. And when you can actually put something down and look at it together, like you said, you're on the same page, literally in this case, right? We're looking at the same screen. But I also think that what that allows you to do is connect with who you're speaking with. And I'm even thinking, so today I started homeschooling. When I say I mean my children are homeschooling at my house. The wife is doing all of it. But I'm going to go play soccer with the kids here. And I think about even just a soccer coach for kids. He's got to be able to connect with them. And I think a lot of these principles are so applicable just in everyday speech of being able to connect with people and deliver your idea. It might just be we're going to kick the ball in the goal, but to have real communication. And but you don't have any slides when you're out on the soccer field, right? So got to come up with a better way to connect.
Yep.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point. One thing you brought up that I really love, this idea of homeschooling. So I actually have a kids program too. I coach a lot of the executives as kids. Mm-hmm. And the way that I do it, that you can actually steal from me and do with your own kids or really anybody out there, is the problem with the education system is it forces kids into believing that public speaking is a chore. That's why a lot of them are scared of it. So what you want to do is have them present one topic that they care about, treat them as if they're the same age as you, and how you're giving them feedback. And in 3 classes, they'll be ridiculously amazing. I coach 7-year-olds, and they're better than a lot of the executives I coach because it's crazy. I'm not even kidding. So that's something you can take away, for your kids or something.
Yeah.
Do you have some short tips on your presentation on how you can make everyone have a better presentation?
Yeah, so I think at the end of the day, the big thing, and obviously let's talk about content delivery too, because we kind of forgot to do this. Sure. I'll do that too. But I think the idea for everybody is that at the end of the day, if there's one thing that you want to remember about public speaking, it's the following. If you have an idea worth sharing, it's a lot easier for you to master public speaking. If you don't know what your topic is, if you don't know why you want to present it, it's a lot harder. So if I take you two, if I just say, give me a speech, you're going to say, okay, then I'm going to present, and then, you're going to get busy, soccer with the kids, and all that stuff's going to happen. You're going to start prioritizing all those other things. But if I ask you instead, what is your ultimate goal with the podcast? What are you trying to achieve? And then you're going to say, well, I want everyone in Texas, I want everyone in the world to understand what the deciding factor is and to grow it to X, Y, Z result. Well, then I would say that the difference between affecting 1,000 people and 1 million is public speaking. So you better start mastering it. And then when you see that clear incentive, you're like, oh, this is an idea worth sharing to me, so I need to go share it. So that's basically the takeaway.
Now it's time for our deciding factor.
Content versus delivery is an easy argument that we can close. Let's think about it. Think about all of the presentations that you've listened to in your life. Okay, I mostly want to focus on high school. A lot of really smart teachers, right? These teachers are well-intentioned, very well-educated. How much do you remember from your high school presentations?
Zero.
Even the best presentations you've watched on TED, your favorite TED speakers, you probably remember one or two key ideas at best. So what conclusion does this drive? It drives the following. Content's important, but nowhere near as important as delivery. Why? Because people are only going to remember one or two ideas. A lot of the people in my space talk about communications, really good content, but they don't deliver in a way that's inspiring, that gets people excited to talk about, that gets them excited and say, I want to master public speaking. Who says that, right? It's the delivery. It's the way that you explain. It's the analogies I use, the videos that I compare to dance, karaoke, and all that weird stuff that I have on the channel. That has nothing to do with content, but everything to do with how you deliver that content. So I think delivery is infinitely better than content.
Wow.
Well, go ahead, John. Keep cutting you off.
Well, I actually have to go against it though, because personally, me,
try it, yeah.
It's kind of one of those things. I'm not going to have any presentation for you. I can't go up and down. I can't smile. I can't do anything if I really don't have that content. I mean, it's go back to the accounting, right? I can make the books look two different ways at least when it comes down to the end of the year when I present you the numbers. But without those numbers, I'm probably going to get fired, right? So,
I mean, okay, so the miscommunication here, I think the difference between our perspectives is if we have different definitions of what public speaking is,
okay.
Right? So I think your definition of public speaking is to teach something, like to teach a concept, to teach an idea.
Sure.
That's not my definition of public speaking. So my definition of public speaking is to convince you to do something, is to take an action. And I'll give you the best example. So there's one exercise that I do with people that I call the random word exercise, where I literally say nonsense, but I make you feel something. So why don't we do this? Alton, why don't you give me a random word?
Random word would be rocket.
Okay, so what I need to do with rocket is I need to create a presentation out of thin air. So here I go. The engines are rumbling. As I'm walking on the grass this morning, I could feel something different happen. And then blast off. A lot of people think that bikes are cool, that cars are cool, that vans are great, but a lot of people miss the most important vehicle of transportation of all, the rocket ship. Rockets aren't just a vehicle that gets us from point A to B where we're waiting in traffic, we're waiting for a deadline to get through an airplane. It instills imagination, creativity in a way that allows us to say, is life just about a car ride? No. Life is about taking a rocket ship and getting us to that next level, getting us to a place that most people aren't willing to go, getting to a place where most people aren't willing to get to. So what are you willing to go? And that's exactly what I'll be presenting this week's episode of the presentation. We'll be talking about rockets and the history behind rockets and everything that has to do with rockets. I just invented it out of the spot, right? And that's the point that I'm driving. I said nonsense, but you felt something from that nonsense.
I'm ready for my rocket.
Point. Yeah, so can I go ahead and change my answer now? I think I need to go back to presentation.
Yeah,
he just made me look so stupid on my show.
Well, I got it. I mean, I'm the speaking coach. I can't be wrong.
Yes.
We're learning. And so I'm trying to think of trying to remember what some of the best speeches that I've heard. And last year I got the opportunity to go to, it was I can't remember the name, but it was a John Maxwell deal. And I don't know if you've heard Rachel Hollis speak, but I got to hear her speak and I'd never heard of her before. And she was on she was in a list of just killer speakers.
Yeah.
And she got up there and she just spit fire.
Yeah, she doesn't mess around.
I was so ready to just take on the world when she got done speaking. And I was so motivated that I could just do more. And like, I had these dreams and they were possible now. And I'm just like so ready. And if I'm being 100% honest, when she stepped on the stage and I didn't know anything about her or anything, I'm like, well, here's another speaker. But when she was done, she had really changed my perspective and really motivated me. I mean, really lit a fire under me to do what I wanted to do. It wasn't even what she wanted me to do. She was telling me to do what I wanted to do. And so I was just so ready to go. And I thought, if I was going to model myself, you know, after another speaker, she would definitely be at the top of the list, if not near the top, because I was so fired up. And for me, like, that was a big deal to inspire other people to pursue their dreams and do what it is that they need to do, or jump on a rocket. I'm ready. You know, it's good.
So
it's
Alton,
good.
Presentation or content? Which one is it?
I think that, I don't know who said the quote, but someone said that after you spend time or hear a presentation or whatever, people are not going to remember what you said, but they're going to remember how you made them feel. And I think that that's true. Like, I couldn't quote a single line from what Rachel Hollis said, but I remember how she made me feel. And I think, I don't know if it's content or presentation and how to word that, but if you can get someone to feel something and to be motivated and connected to that idea that you're sharing, then to me, that's the real secret sauce, because that's what's going to produce change. Like, just listening to Brenden go off on a rocket, I'm thinking it's a funny example, right? But what if I'm trying to instill morals in my own kids, or I'm trying to produce sales for my own company to provide for myself and others and help other people win? It's a big deal. And so I think it's like that convincing part of it for me, which may be like dancing around the question, but that's my thoughts on it.
I think he was saying presentation. Isn't that what he's saying?
I think so.
I think we're both stuck on your page on this one.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not going to argue with Brenden. So
No, it was amazing how you turned a story of a rocket into that big, great thing you did there. I mean, so do you do stuff like that often?
Yeah, so what I usually tell people, so the first thing I want to point out is don't compare yourself to me, right? I've done this exercise thousands of times. So the second thing that I ask the audience is I'm only asking for 5 minutes of your time every day. 5 words, 1 minute each: light bulb, tree, laundry, wife that I'm having trouble arguing with, and door. That's it. Spend a minute, try and make presentations out of it. And if you do that for a year, 5 times a day, 5 minutes a day, you'll have done the exercise 1,800 times, and you'll present exactly like me.
You know, I think that that's a good, and this is what my big takeaway is, because for me, and kind of what I was fishing for with you, Brenden, is that I think that your ability to communicate is huge. And I think in business, the better you can communicate, we can call it public speaking if you want, that is where you're going to move up in revenue and influence. All of that to me is attached to your ability to communicate. And so I want to be able to instill those values into my kids at an early age so that they're not struggling with it when they're dad's age. And I think what a fun little game, like charades, but it's like, all right, you got to give a speech about a light bulb. Go. You got 30 seconds, right? And turn it into something fun.
Exactly.
And exciting.
Wow.
And then, you know, when you're learning, it's fun instead of fear. It's like, I got to give a speech. Yeah, it's kind of like what dad made us do. Just make us talk about light bulbs, weirdo.
Exactly. And that's the point, right? I'm so passionate about it. Like, it drives me crazy, right? I think that's the difference between people who are really amazing speakers and people who want to be but aren't putting in the work, is this idea of talking to your audience and not just thinking about them intellectually. And that's why I don't like a bunch of coaches, they come up to these workshops and they always say the following: did you know that after death, public speaking fear is rampaging society like some sort of flu? Obviously, I'm cartooning a bit here, as you can imagine. But they're right. I mean, yeah, public speaking fear is something we have. But let's just take a step back. If our goal here is to inspire you to take action, if our goal here is to make you do a presentation, have fun doing it, the last thing I'm ever going to do is compare it to death. It's just like so simple, it's just things like that. If you care enough, I think you'll be a lot better as a speaker.
Wow. So I guess tell us and our listeners out there, how we can get in touch with you, how we can learn more about what you have to offer, as well as some of these videos that you put on the web.
Yeah, absolutely, John. So if you have any questions for me, you can message me directly on Instagram. So that's Master Your Talk. So I'm open to questions, concerns, complaints, insults. Don't be shy to kind of let me know what you think. And if you want to check
open that door.
I open it all the time. Nobody has sent me anything yet, so I'm hoping for an insult or two. But for YouTube, if you want to look at all of my free tips that I share on the channel, that's MasterTalk in one word.
Wow. And Facebook, are you on there? Twitter?
Yeah, not really Twitter. Facebook, I'm on there, but I post basically what's on Instagram, so I would focus on Instagram and YouTube.
Tell me your Instagram again.
That's Master Your Talk, and YouTube is Master Talk in one word.
It's Your Talk, Master Your Talk, not the talk.
Man. Yeah. No, you've shared a lot of good tips. I'm hoping I don't get a horrible email from you later. Because
about what?
you give tips on how people screw up on their speeches. So I don't
That's
want
it, right? Alton, I counted 75 ums and
well, actually, it was 77, but it's okay.
Dang, I like 7. 7's a good number.
It's a good number.
No, this has been really good, and I'm excited that anyone listening has some real tools that they can take away. And I think that this is something, like Brenden, you even said, it's not something that like you get your diploma on and now you're good. It's something that you continue to perfect as you move on. And so I like those types of topics that you can always improve on. You never really make it, right? It's a constant development to get better and better. Like, look at Les Brown. How old is he? And he's still just killing it, like every time he talks, I'm like, I'm ready. When he's done talking, I'm like, okay, let's go. I'm ready.
No, one thing I can't wait for is the fact that, and I just said another, there goes another email. But no, the thing I can't wait for is the next few podcasts we do is having to insert things like rocket, light bulb, and see if you can throw it into the next podcast. We're going to have fun with this now. You've built it up for us.
It's good. It's good.
All right. It's been fun, Brenden. Anything else you want to say to the folks out there about anything?
Yeah, for sure. I'll leave you off with my book recommendation, my life recommendation. So book, for those who want to learn more about public speaking, you should check out Thirst by Scott Harrison. It's a great book, best book on public speaking I ever read. And for life advice, I'll leave you with my favorite quote of all time, which is as follows: be insane or be the same. If you want to be like everyone else, that's totally fine. But if you made it this far in the show, you probably want to do something different with your life. And my advice to you is the only way to achieve that is to be crazy. Don't you find it odd that a 22-year-old started a YouTube channel, not on vlogs, not on pranks, but on public speaking and communication, started coaching C-level executives at 23, but is also having this very conversation on the mattress that he sleeps on, lives in his mother's basement, doesn't own a car, doesn't plan on moving out of his mother's house until he's 31. Why do any of those decisions make any sense? And that's the point. Once your decisions only make sense to the only person that matters, which is you, only then will you start figuring out something interesting worth doing with your life.
Wow. Gotta leave it there. Say bye, guys.
Can I make a recommendation to Brenden?
Sure.
I could save it for Instagram, but if you're listening to the podcast, Brenden has a headset with a mic on it. And so I would think, being in the speaking profession, you need a mic that you can just drop. You can't really, can't drop the headset mic. After that, you need to like drop something. That was great. Thanks for coming on, Brenden. We really appreciate it. You're awesome.
It's been
You
fun.
too.
Say bye, guys.
Take care, everyone.
Bye-bye.
This has been another episode of The Deciding Factor, giving you food for thought on real life issues. Be sure to click, like, and subscribe to this podcast, as well as all your big social media outlets, Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram. Don't forget to check out our website at thedecidingfactorpodcast.com and give us comments and feedback. Until next time, stay safe and remember to keep an open mind.